On live TV, Jimmy Fallon asked Jungkook about Jimin. He froze. What truth was too painful to say? Is it true Jimin said that about you? The question was meant to be playful, a light jab in the middle of a bright laughing segment. But the moment it left Jimmy Fallon's mouth, the room fell into a vacuum of silence. Even the audience, who had erupted in cheers seconds earlier, stilled into a tense hush. The camera zoomed in, catching every microsecond of Jungkook's reaction. His smile faltered. His hands, resting comfortably on his lap, suddenly clenched. And his eyes, those usually soft, open eyes, turned distant. I'd rather not answer that, Jungkook finally said, his voice barely audible. The silence that followed wasn't scripted. Not even Jimmy could cover it with a joke. It was supposed to be a celebration of Jungkook's latest solo performance. The lights were warm, the set dressed like a late-night sanctuary of comfort, but now, with millions watching live, something unspoken had pierced through, and it all started with one name: Jimin. Jungkook adjusted the hem of his black satin jacket as if trying to ground himself. His throat tightened as he glanced to the side, away from Jimmy, away from the crowd, away from the truth that had been clawing at his chest for weeks. No one on that set knew that 5 hours before he stepped onto the stage, he had thrown his phone across the room after replaying Jimin's voice message for the 100th time. The message that never should have existed. The words that weren't meant to be recorded. The moment he wished he could erase. Backstage earlier that evening, he'd sat alone in his dressing room, one leg bouncing restlessly. The makeup artist had stopped trying to retouch his face, his expression wouldn't soften. His manager had asked 3 times if he was ready. He was, but he walked out anyway. That's what idols do, that's what he always did. And yet, standing under the talk show lights when Jimmy casually asked about the rumor, something Jimin had allegedly said in Paris, Jungkook's armor cracked. Jimmy had no idea. He thought it was just late-night TV fodder, the usual gossip that floats through fan threads and international tabloids. But to Jungkook it wasn't rumor, it was real. It was a moment that happened beneath the Arc de Triomphe at 1:03 a.m. when Jimin, unaware that a paparazzo was still lurking, said something that changed everything. And now it was public. And now Jimmy Fallon had asked about it. And Jungkook said nothing. The audience didn't know how to react. Some laughed nervously, others clapped, trying to cut the tension. But inside Jungkook's mind, chaos was unfolding, the sound of traffic in Paris, the crunch of gravel under their boots, Jimin's breath shaky, saying, "You were never supposed to hear that." But he had. He'd heard it and said nothing back. And that silence, that very same silence, had followed them back to Seoul, into their dance studio, into every practice, every dinner they used to share without words. And now it was here, between them and the entire world. After the tapping, Jungkook left the studio without speaking to anyone, not even his label rep, who trailed behind looking like she was about to collapse. Outside, the rain had started to fall. Hollywood lights glittered off the wet asphalt like broken promises. He took a deep breath and stood still at the curb, ignoring the security detail. A voice echoed behind him, faint, familiar, broken. "Hyung, wait." But it was Jimin. It was Taehyung. Jungkook turned slowly, and the look on his face made Taehyung freeze mid-step. There was something in his eyes, not anger, not sadness, just distance. "He asked me what Jimin did," Jungkook said quietly, staring past Taehyung. "And you didn't answer," Taehyung replied. Jungkook gave a faint nod, "Because I didn't want the world to know that I forgave him." Rain hammered down on the cobblestones of Rue de Tilsit, turning the street into a glistening river of lights. The Eiffel Tower loomed in the distance, veiled in fog like a guilty secret. Jimin's coat clung to his body as he walked briskly, eyes hidden beneath the brim of his cap. His breath came in quiet bursts, not from exhaustion, from something heavier. He didn't know someone was following him. Not Jungkook. Not Taehyung. Someone else with a camera and a motive. Earlier that evening, Jimin had wandered alone through the quiet corners of Paris, thinking no one would recognize him. It was supposed to be a night off. No schedule, no security, just space to think. He told no one, not even Jungkook, where he was going, because he needed to say something out loud, into the dark, not for anyone else to hear. But someone did. A hidden microphone had caught his voice near the Arc de Triomphe, raw, tired, and trembling as he muttered into his scarf. "I know he still thinks I meant it, but I never did. I just couldn't tell him then. I was afraid. I always am when it comes to him." It was barely above a whisper, but it was captured. And 3 days later it was everywhere. A low-quality audio file with grainy subtitles began circulating on underground fan forums. Then TikTok, then Twitter, millions of views in hours. No one knew when or how it was recorded, but everyone knew who it was about. Jimin and Jungkook. The words weren't specific, no names were mentioned, but it was enough. The fandom exploded. Theories spun like wildfires. Did Jimin lie to Jungkook about something? Did he regret something he said during their Tokyo argument? Was it about the night Jungkook left rehearsal early without a word and Jimin never followed? By the time Jungkook heard it, alone in his hotel room in New York, he knew. It was real. And it was too late. The next day, back in Seoul, Jimin sat on the rooftop of HYBE's private building. The cold metal bench stung through his jeans, but he didn't move. He stared at the clouds, gray and unbothered, as if they might give him a sign. He didn't flinch when the door creaked open behind him. "Do you know what you said?" Taehyung asked, stepping into the wind. Jimin didn't turn. "I do now." Taehyung approached slowly, his coat flapped in the breeze, his face unreadable. He heard it. Jimin shut his eyes. Taehyung sat beside him. "He won't talk to me, barely looked at me after the Fallen show, but he said something strange." "What?" "He said he forgave you." Jimin's breath caught. Taehyung turned to him, voice softer now, but he didn't say what for. A long silence, then Jimin whispered, "Because I never told him the truth. I let him believe that he was the problem, that he wanted more than I could give. And now the world knows, but he doesn't." That night, Jungkook stared at the mirror in his apartment, lit only by the flicker of a candle. His reflection was blurred with exhaustion, his eyes rimmed red. He replayed the clip again, Jimin's voice echoing through the dark room like a ghost. "I was afraid." Jungkook leaned forward until his forehead touched the mirror. His voice cracked as he spoke to his own reflection. "I was too." Just then his phone buzzed. A message from Taehyung. "He's ready to talk if you are." Jungkook didn't move, his hand hovered over the screen. The rain outside grew louder. Another message appeared. "Please, for both of you." 20 minutes later, Jungkook stood at the threshold of Jimin's apartment. The door was slightly open. Inside, a soft light spilled onto the floor. The living room was silent, empty but alive with tension, and then from the hallway came a sound. A slow breath, a creaking floorboard. Then Jimin stepped into view, his eyes swollen, his voice barely holding. "You came." Jungkook said nothing. In that silence, the same silence from the Fallen show, returned. But this time, it wasn't a refusal. It was a beginning. Jungkook stood in Jimin's apartment like a stranger. The room was unchanged from the last time he was here, same gray velvet couch, same row of vinyl records lined up by genre, same faint scent of bergamot and something warmer, uniquely Jimin. But now everything felt foreign, even the silence between them, especially the silence. Jimin stepped forward, his hands visibly trembling, though he tried to hide it by folding them in front of his chest. His eyes didn't meet Jungkook at first. He looked to the side, to the ceiling, even to the floor, anywhere but those eyes. "You heard the recording," Jimin finally said. Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He looked at him carefully, as if trying to determine whether this was real, whether Jimin would finally tell the truth or just give him another carefully composed line, something polished, PR-safe, distanced by fear. But Jimin's face was bare, exhausted, real. "I didn't know I was being recorded," he added, voice quieter. Jungkook swallowed hard. That wasn't the problem. Jimin blinked. Jungkook took a step forward. "The problem was, you never said it to me. You said it to the night, to the cold air, to yourself, but never to me." A long silence fell again, but this time Jimin didn't run from it. "I couldn't," he admitted, "not then." "Why?" "Because I didn't trust myself not to ruin what we had." Jungkook's jaw clenched. "So you chose silence again." "I chose survival," Jimin said. "I thought if I said what I really felt, it would open something I wasn't ready to carry." "And now," Jungkook asked, eyes burning with something deeper than anger, "now that the whole world heard what I should have heard first?" Jimin's voice cracked. "Now, I wish I had the courage to say it in your eyes before anyone else got the chance." Jungkook turned away for a moment, his reflection catching in the window, rain streaking down the glass like veins on skin. His mind flashed with memories. The hotel lobby in Tokyo where they passed each other in silence, the rehearsal in Busan where they barely touched even during choreo that required it, the studio session where Jimin left early without even grabbing his coat. Jimin finally stepped closer. Do you want to know what I meant exactly? Jungkook didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. Jimin took it as a yes. I meant that I loved you in ways I was ashamed of, he said, the words trembling out like raw strings pulled too tight. And I ran from it. I made you doubt everything, and that's on me. Silence. Then softer, but I never stopped, even when I pretended I did. Jungkook shut his eyes. His breath shook. The clock ticked loud on the wall. Why now? He asked quietly. Jimin smiled bitterly, because the lie finally broke me. They stood there, two shadows cut from the same light, barely touching the truth between them. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't scripted. It was messy, painful, full of gaps and wounds and things they would probably never fully say, but it was honest. And for once it was enough. Jungkook opened his mouth, the night before Jimmy Fallon. He hesitated. Jimin looked up. I stayed up until dawn, Jungkook said. I watched the clip 34 times, not because I needed proof, but because part of me was waiting to see if it was real. You sounded like someone who regretted everything, and I wanted you to. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came. Jungkook continued, because if you regretted it, it meant you felt it too. Jimin took another breath, shallow, almost fragile. I did, he whispered, I do. This time Jungkook didn't look away. And for the first time in a long time, Jimin didn't either. They sat on the couch, eventually two people in the aftermath of something unspoken for far too long. The television played in the background, volume low, not a word was spoken for almost an hour. But in that silence something softened. Not forgiven, not forgot. But understood. Jungkook finally spoke again. The world's going to ask questions. I know, Jimin said. And I'm not ready to answer any of them. You don't have to. I still can't answer Jimmy's question, Jungkook added, a small bitter chuckle under his breath. Jimin looked at him. But now, Jungkook said, finally turning, at least I know why. Jimin nodded slowly. His voice was quiet when he said, and now I'll stop running from it. The rain continued outside. But for the first time in weeks, the storm between them had passed. The morning after their conversation, the world wasn't kind. Headlines exploded like landmines across every entertainment platform in the world. The clip from The Tonight Show had gone viral in less than 6 hours, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Jungkook freezes at Fallen. Is it about Jimin's secret Paris confession? BTS rift. Jungkook avoids that question. Jimin involved. Jungkook's emotional silence sparks fan frenzy. Tell us the truth. And beneath each headline, speculation, screenshots, slowed down video frames, breakdowns of every blink, every shift in posture, every micro-expression. Millions of eyes, millions of opinions, but none of them knew what had actually happened inside Jimin's apartment just 12 hours earlier. Jungkook stayed off his phone. But it didn't matter. He was trending on every platform anyway. At the same time, in a quiet cafe tucked away in Gangnam, Jimin sat hunched over his untouched espresso. He wore a gray hoodie pulled low over his eyes. Taehyung sat across from him, arms crossed, silent for once. You're not going to say anything? Jimin asked after a while. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. You really think there's anything to say right now that wouldn't make it worse? Jimin let out a bitter laugh, wiping his mouth with the sleeve of his hoodie. It's already worse. You're lucky he came over at all. I know. Taehyung leaned in, voice low, and what you said to him. Jimin nodded slowly, swallowing hard. It was the truth. Taehyung studied his friend's face, the kind of exhausted, emotionally hollow expression he hadn't seen on him since the early days of their debut. Back then, Jimin hid his struggles with a smile. Now he didn't bother. You know they're calling it a breakup. Silence, right? Taehyung said, even though no one knows what it was. Jimin didn't answer. They're dragging both of you into something you haven't even figured out yet. That's the part that scares me the most, Jimin murmured. Taehyung exhaled, then reached into his coat and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. What's this? Your next rehearsal schedule, you're both assigned the same set. Jimin looked up, they didn't separate us. No, maybe they thought it would help. Jimin scoffed, or they just want to see if we'll combust in front of the cameras. Taehyung gave a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe it's time the cameras stopped deciding when you speak. Jungkook sat alone in his apartment later that night, lights dim, laptop open to a blank document. The blinking cursor taunted him. His management had asked for a statement, nothing official, just a few words to cool the flames, but every time he started to write, it felt like betrayal. He didn't want to reduce what happened between him and Jimin into 280 characters. Or worse, into a fake rehearsed piece photo. The cursor blinked again, he slammed the laptop shut. The silence was worse. He walked to the balcony, pulling the sliding glass door open. The night air hit his face like a slap. Below, Seoul buzzed with lights and noise, but up here he was alone. Until the doorbell rang. His heart leapt. He moved slowly, cautiously, like the moment might vanish if he moved too fast, but when he opened the door, it was Jimin. It was their manager. You need to see this, she said, breathless. She handed him a tablet with a headline glowing across the top. Anonymous staff member leaks BTS Paris audio timeline. It wasn't an accident. Jungkook's chest tightened. He scrolled. And there it was. A claim that the audio clip wasn't caught by accident. That it was leaked intentionally. By someone close to them. His throat dried, his fingers gripped the edges of the tablet. The article ended with a quote, "Sometimes idols lie to protect each other, but the truth always leaks louder." The next morning, Jimin received the same article link on his phone. From Jungkook. No message, no emoji, no anger. Just the article. Jimin stared at it for a long time before whispering under his breath, "They think I did it." The guilt that had lived in his chest before now mutated into something crueler, shame. Not for what he said in Paris, but because now the world believed he might have betrayed the one person he had tried to protect. And Jungkook was watching in silence again. Not refusing. Not forgiving. Just watching. The recording was never meant to exist. That was what Jimin told himself again and again. But now, with millions dissecting every decibel of his broken voice and theories swirling like smoke in every corner of the internet, denial wasn't an option anymore. Someone close had leaked it. And that someone had access to their schedule, their security logs, their private whereabouts. Which meant it wasn't a fan. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone inside HYBE. Jungkook sat at the head of the conference table, arms crossed, lips tight. Around him, the room buzzed with discomfort. Executives avoided eye contact. The public relations director was flipping through crisis management templates. His manager sat silently beside him, her jaw clenched. "I don't want another vague statement," Jungkook said coldly. "I want names." One of the higher-ups coughed. "There's no confirmation yet, just speculation." Jungkook narrowed his eyes, then find confirmation. The room quieted. Finally, the youngest tech staff member, barely out of his 20s, stood shakily and cleared his throat. "We checked the Paris security logs. There were only 3 staffers who knew Jimin was staying near Place Charles de Gaulle that night. All 3 had access to internal comms. One of them," he paused, "was reassigned to another label 2 days after the clip leaked." Jungkook didn't blink. "Who?" he asked. The boy looked at the PR director. She nodded with hesitation. "Her name is Siohana," he said. Jungkook felt his jaw tighten. Siohana. She wasn't a stranger. She was Jimin's former styling coordinator. And one of the few people Jimin had trusted with his location in Paris. Meanwhile, at the practice studio, Jimin dropped his phone as the news broke. He had just finished stretching, sweat still beading on his temples when the notification lit up. BTS leak traced to former stylist Siohana, allegedly had access to confidential audio. He stared at the screen as if it had punched him. Taehyung, who'd been checking his own phone nearby, slowly turned to him. "You saw it." Jimin nodded once, eyes wide, voice thin. "She was with us in Paris. She's been quiet since she left, but if this is true..." Jimin didn't let him finish. He turned, grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the studio without a word. Jungkook was already waiting in the underground parking lot when Jimin arrived at the company building. Neither of them had planned it, but fate or confrontation had a different plan. The moment their eyes met, the air turned electric. "You saw?" Jungkook asked. Jimin nodded. "Do you believe it?" "I didn't want to," Jungkook replied, "but I do." Jimin exhaled slowly. "I trusted her." "You told her where you were staying." "I didn't think she'd ever." "Sell you out," Jungkook snapped. "Sell us out." The silence was sharp. Then Jimin said, voice cracking, "I thought I was safe around her. I needed to believe someone had my back." Jungkook looked away. "That makes two of us," he whispered. Later that evening, Seohana posted a vague story on her private social media account. It disappeared within 40 minutes, but not before it was screen captured and shared thousands of times. Sometimes they forget who helped build their image. Maybe they should remember who cleaned up their messes when the cameras weren't rolling. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a denial. It was gasoline. Fans erupted, hashtags trended globally. Protect Jimin and justice for Jungkook dominated the timeline, but they came with a sharp edge. Support was splintered. Some blamed the label for not screening staff. Others pointed fingers at Jimin, suggesting he'd always been careless. A smaller, crueler group questioned if the leak had been intentional. That night, Jungkook sent one message to Jimin. "Don't open Twitter." Jimin replied, "I already did." By morning, Jimin hadn't slept, neither had Jungkook. Their faces were expected to be camera-ready for a brand shoot, but neither man looked like a star. Under the lights, the photographer kept calling for smiles. But all he got were shadows. During a break, Jimin stepped outside into the cold. Taehyung followed him. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Jimin leaned against the wall, his breath misting in the air. "I don't know how to answer that anymore." Taehyung nodded. "Do you want to disappear?" Jimin didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Then disappear," Taehyung said, "but not alone." Jimin turned to him, startled. "And Taehyung finished, take him with you." Back inside, Jungkook was watching the rain trail down the studio window again, the same way it did that night after Fallen. His phone buzzed. A new message. From Jimin. "Let's go somewhere, just us. No cameras, no noise, just silence we choose." Jungkook stared at the message. And for the first time in weeks, he smiled. No GPS, no security, no staff. Just 2 duffel bags, a tank of gas, and a shared understanding that neither of them could survive another week pretending they were okay. Jungkook drove. Jimin sat beside him, staring out at the highway lights blurring like ghosts. Neither spoke for the first 2 hours. They didn't need to. The absence of noise was a choice now, not a punishment. No one told them what to say, no one expected answers. And for the first time in weeks, the silence wasn't hostile, it was healing. They didn't go far, not Paris, not Jeju. Just a small seaside village in Gangwon-do, barely a dot on the map, tucked between cliffs and wind-carved beaches. It was the kind of place that smelled like pine, salt, and forgotten time. The air was clean, the people didn't stare, and the rental house had no Wi-Fi. Perfect. Jungkook lit the fire, Jimin unpacked the groceries. Neither of them brought a guitar, neither of them mentioned music. It was day 1 of not being BTS. And it was terrifying. On the second night, Jimin woke from a nightmare. He sat up in the dark, breath ragged, sweat cold on his back. The dream had been vague but cruel, camera flashes, microphones shoved in his face, Jungkook walking away without a word. He stepped outside, barefoot on the deck, wrapped in a blanket. Jungkook was already there. Sitting on the steps, staring at the stars. He didn't look up when he spoke. "You talk in your sleep." Jimin winced. "What did I say?" Jungkook shrugged. "Not much, just my name twice." Jimin sat down beside him. The night air wrapped around them like a question they didn't know how to answer. "I used to think I'd be relieved if the world forgot me," Jimin said after a while. "Now I just want them to remember the right version of me." Jungkook turned to him. "And which version is that?" Jimin looked at his hands. "The one that didn't lie to you." Jungkook didn't reply, but he didn't move away either. They spent the next morning walking along the empty beach. The wind whipped around them like it was trying to remind them of something, maybe childhood, maybe innocence. Jimin skipped a stone across the water. It bounced once and sank. Jungkook laughed softly. That was sad. Like me, Jimin replied dryly. Jungkook nudged him. You always say that when you want attention. Jimin smirked. Did it work? Jungkook didn't answer, but he picked up a stone, threw it twice the distance. Show off, Jimin mumbled. It was the first time they'd laughed together in what felt like forever. Later in the kitchen, Jimin dropped a glass. It shattered across the floor, slicing through the piece. He flinched as Jungkook rushed in, eyes wide. You okay? Jungkook asked, grabbing a towel. Yeah, sorry, Jimin said, crouching to pick up shards. I'm always breaking things lately. Jungkook paused. Not always. Jimin looked up. Some things, Jungkook continued slowly, you're still learning how to carry. Jimin's eyes burned. The glass wasn't the only thing that had cracked. That night they didn't sleep in separate rooms. Not out of romance, not out of comfort. But because fear sounded louder in isolation. Jungkook lay on the floor in a sleeping bag, Jimin on the bed above, staring at the ceiling. Neither of them said a word, but at 3:12 a.m. Jimin leaned over the side and whispered, Do you think we're broken? Jungkook whispered back, No, I think we're bruised. Silence. Then Jimin asked, Do bruises heal? Jungkook waited before answering. Yes, he said, if you stop hitting the same spot. Back in Seoul, chaos brewed. Fans noticed their disappearance, flights were tracked, airport sightings emerged, Dispatch posted a blurry photo of two hooded figures at a gas station, but it wasn't clear. HYBE released a statement. Jungkook and Jimin are on a short personal break, please respect their privacy. But respect is rarely given to the famous. Theories exploded, some accused them of quitting BTS, others claimed they were lovers escaping media pressure, some fans wept, others raged. The truth, though. The truth was much simpler. They were two men trying to remember who they were, without the cameras, without the pressure, without the versions of themselves the world had forced them to become. On the fifth day, the storm outside intensified, wind battered the windows, the power flickered. Jungkook and Jimin sat by the fire, wrapped in thick sweaters, sipping lukewarm tea. Jimin broke the silence. What happens when we go back? Jungkook stared into the flames. Nothing, he said, and everything. Jimin nodded and fallen. I still won't answer, Jungkook said, not because I'm ashamed. Then why? Jungkook turned to him, because what you did, what we are, doesn't belong to anyone else. Jimin's throat tightened, not even them. No, Jungkook said softly, just us. And for the first time, Jimin let himself believe it. The Seoul skyline looked different after silence. As the car rolled past the Han River, glimmering like an old memory, Jungkook stared out the window without speaking. Beside him, Jimin wore sunglasses and a black cap pulled low, not to hide from the public, but to protect what little of himself he still hadn't given away. Their 5-day escape had ended. And now the city was waiting, with cameras, questions, and demands they could no longer outrun. The company had prepared for this. Scripts had been drafted. Talking points rehearsed. Responses sanitized. But neither of them wanted to use them. We'll speak, Jungkook told their manager, but on our terms. That wasn't what HYBE wanted to hear, but Jungkook's voice left no room for negotiation. Jimin stood beside him in silence, but his presence was a confirmation. They weren't coming back as idols. They were coming back as men. The press conference was scheduled at a discreet hotel ballroom with only selected media invited. No streaming, no fan cameras, just official coverage. But BTS fans were relentless. Within minutes of the press entry, social media was flooded with leaks, theories, countdowns. By the time Jungkook and Jimin stepped onto the stage, millions were already watching. The room went still. Not a flash, not a whisper. Jimin looked down briefly, took a breath and raised his gaze. Jungkook's jaw was tight, but his hands were steady. There were no stylists, no rehearsed greetings. Just a single mic. And the truth. A reporter stood. Let's begin with the Fallen interview. Jungkook, your silence became one of the most viral moments this year. The question was about Jimin. Do you want to clarify now what you couldn't say then? Jungkook looked at Jimin. Jimin gave a small nod, barely perceptible. Then Jungkook turned back. I refuse to answer, he said, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the truth didn't belong to the world yet. It belonged to me, to him. A murmur rose across the room. Jungkook continued, and now we've had that conversation, privately, honestly, and we're still having it. The reporter raised an eyebrow, so it was about something personal between you two. Jimin finally spoke, his voice didn't tremble. Yes and no, it was personal, but it became public without consent. That audio was taken from a private moment, leaked, twisted, and yes, I said something in Paris that I hadn't said to Jungkook before. Another reporter interjected, do you regret saying it? Jimin answered without hesitation, no, I regret not saying it sooner, to him, not to the world. That was all they offered. They didn't name the staff member who leaked the audio. They didn't detail what was said. They didn't feed the gossip. But the weight of what they didn't say, what hung between the lines, was louder than any scandal. Later, as the press conference ended, their manager pulled them aside. You know this won't stop the questions. We know, Jungkook said. But it's the first time I'm not afraid of them, Jimin added. Outside, the fans were waiting. Some cried. Some cheered. Some were confused. But most just watched. Jimin stepped forward and bowed deeply. Jungkook followed. No words, just reverence. A fan screamed out through the silence, are you two okay now? Jungkook looked up. He didn't smile, he didn't pose. He just raised his hand in a small wave and said softly, we're learning. That night, Jimin returned to his apartment for the first time since Paris broke open. The lights felt foreign, the air was heavy, but the silence didn't strangle him anymore. There was a note on his kitchen counter, folded once. His housekeeper must have left it there, she often picked up his mail. Jimin opened it. It was from Seo Hana. A single line. I didn't mean to break you, I just wanted you to feel it too. He stared at it, unreadable. Then he crumpled it and threw it into the trash. I already did, he whispered. Meanwhile, Jungkook sat alone in his studio, surrounded by unfinished tracks and dim blue lighting. He opened his voice recorder and pressed record. No beat. No melody. Just words. I kept it in for too long, and when it came out it wasn't mine anymore, but I still have my voice, and I want to use it now. He hit save. The file name. To Jimin, no one else. The studio was dimly lit, Jungkook's preference. No overheads, just floor lamps with warm bulbs that cast soft, liquid shadows across the wood-paneled walls. The quiet wasn't hostile this time, but it wasn't easy either. It was filled with weight, like air saturated with rain that refused to fall. Jimin stood in the vocal booth. Headphones on. Eyes closed. Hands trembling. Jungkook sat behind the glass, fingers hovering over the record button, but he didn't press it yet. He watched, listened not for the voice but for the silence between Jimin's breaths. The same silence that started it all. He finally clicked record. Jimin opened his mouth. And the note cracked before it reached the pitch. Jungkook didn't flinch, he didn't stop the session, he didn't even move, he just waited. Jimin turned, pulled the headphones down slowly. It's not working. Why? Jungkook asked quietly. Jimin stepped out of the booth, exhaling hard, because every line sounds like an apology I haven't earned yet. Jungkook met his gaze, then right when you mean. The track was called Echoes. It wasn't a comeback song. It wasn't for an album. It wasn't even meant to be heard by anyone but the two of them. They worked on it like surgeons handling a pulse that barely held. Every note was dissected. Every lyric was a landmine. Jimin rewrote the bridge 3 times. Jungkook discarded 5 melodies. The tension wasn't artistic, it was personal. Every bar was a conversation they hadn't had yet. On the 3rd day, Jungkook added a line without telling Jimin. When Jimin returned to the studio the next morning and played the demo, he froze. The line hit him in the gut. If you had said it before Paris, would I still be bleeding now? He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. Later that night, Jimin stood alone in the control room listening to the looped version of that one verse, over and over again. His shoulders slumped, his mouth trembled, he stared at the empty booth. Jungkook walked in slowly. Why didn't you delete it? Jimin asked, not turning. Because it was true, Jungkook said. I hate that it is. Jungkook stepped closer, then write the line that heals it. Jimin turned to him, eyes glassy but alive. Do you think we can? Jungkook hesitated. I think we already are. The next morning, fans woke up to a surprise post. No teaser. No announcement. Just a photo of two pairs of headphones, one black, one white, resting side by side. Caption simply, we're still writing. The internet fractured. No hashtags. No album name. No audio clip. But the message was clear. They hadn't walked away. They hadn't broken. They were still something. Later that evening, as the wind howled outside the studio, Jungkook and Jimin sat in silence again, this time in front of a mic, not behind glass. Jimin opened a new voice memo and looked at Jungkook. Ready? Jungkook nodded. Jimin hit record. We don't owe anyone the ending they want. We only owe each other the truth. And sometimes that's not a song. Sometimes it's a scar that finally stops bleeding. He stopped the recording. Jungkook whispered, keep it. On the rooftop that night, Seoul glittered like shattered glass. Jimin leaned against the railing. Jungkook stood beside him. Neither said a word for a long time. Then Jimin asked, do you miss the quiet before all this? Jungkook thought for a moment. No, because the silence before you spoke, that hurt more. Jimin nodded slowly. I won't go silent again. And Jungkook this time believed him. The studio lights flickered once, then steadied. 7 chairs, 1 room, no cameras, no staff, no label reps, just the members. It had been months since they'd all been together like this, not at a shoot, not on stage, not on schedule. Just 7 men, older now, quieter, each carrying their own weight, but tonight all eyes were on 2. Jimin sat with his hands locked in his lap, thumbs pressing together, knuckles white. Jungkook sat across from him, legs apart, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Namjoon broke the silence first. We've read everything, seen everything, but we still haven't heard from you. His voice wasn't angry, it wasn't cold, but it carried the weight of leadership, the quiet demand for truth. Taehyung leaned forward. Why didn't either of you tell us sooner? Jimin looked up. Because we didn't know what it was yet. Yoongi's tone was more cutting. But now you do. Jungkook answered, we're still figuring it out, but we know what it's not. Seokjin tilted his head. What is it not? Jungkook looked at Jimin. It's not fake. Silence. The kind of silence that meant pain was being processed in real time. Hoseok sighed, breaking the tension. You two aren't just part of this team, you are this team. When something breaks between you, we all feel it. Namjoon nodded. This isn't about your private lives, it's about trust. It's about knowing that when something threatens one of us, we deal with it together. Taehyung's voice softened. You think you're protecting us by carrying it alone, but you're not, you're just bleeding where we can't see. Jimin swallowed hard. I didn't want you to see me as weak, he whispered. Yoongi frowned. We've all been weak. Hoseok added, that's why we're still here. Jungkook reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen, then played a recording. Jimin's voice filled the room, the unreleased track, echoes. The members listened in silence as Jimin's confession bled through the speakers, line by line. When it ended, no one spoke immediately. Then Seokjin, calm, wise, simply said, so this is your truth. Jimin nodded. Namjoon nodded too. Then you owe it to yourselves and us to keep going. Yoongi looked directly at Jungkook, but if you're going to walk into fire, don't walk in alone. Jungkook breathed out, we're not. The atmosphere shifted. Not into joy, not into forgiveness, but into understanding. Taehyung stood and walked to Jimin, placing a hand on his shoulder. We didn't need you to be perfect, he said, we just needed you to be honest. Later that night, as the group shared quiet food and exhausted laughter, Jungkook leaned against the window, watching the rain again. Jimin approached, holding 2 cups of tea. He handed one over. They still love us, Jimin said. They never stopped, Jungkook replied. Jimin stared out the window with him. Do you think the world will? Jungkook took a sip. I don't care anymore. Jimin blinked. Really? Jungkook turned to him, expression calm but certain. They can have the stage, they can have the lights, but they don't get us. Jimin smiled. I'm okay with that, he said, as long as we still have each other. Jungkook raised his cup to 7 shadows. Jimin clinked his cup softly, and the truth in the dark. The stage was built in secret. No broadcast deal. No press invitation. No digital countdown. Just a cryptic message posted at midnight from the official BTS account. One night, no lights but ours, you'll know where to be. Within 20 minutes, hashtags exploded. Within hours, thousands began camping outside the old Olympic Arena, an iconic venue the group had once called home, now empty for years until tonight. By the time the moon reached its highest point, every seat was full. There were no opening acts, no background visuals, no synchronized graphics, just the 7 members walking out under raw white light in simple black. No logos. No sponsors. No filters. Jungkook stepped to the mic first. He didn't speak immediately. He let the silence echo. And then he said, "We won't be answering any more questions after tonight, not in interviews, not on shows, not online, because tonight is not about what was said or not said, it's about what we feel, right now, in front of you with no one else writing the script but us." Jimin joined him, nodding slightly before turning to the crowd. "We used to think our stories had to be perfect to be worthy. We were wrong, they just had to be honest. This next song, it's not from an album, it's not for charts, it's for you, for the ones who stayed, and for the ones we almost lost, including each other." The lights dimmed. A hush fell. Then a soft piano began. And echoes, the song they'd written in silence through fire, behind closed doors, rose like a prayer into the stadium air. Jimin's voice cracked on the second line. He didn't stop. Jungkook didn't turn away. Instead, he walked toward him, mid-verse, and sang the harmony beside him. Not behind. Not across. Beside. The rest of the members joined in slowly, turning the song into something greater, something layered with years of love, conflict, scars, and survival. When the final note hit, the crowd didn't cheer. They wept. Because they understood what wasn't said. After the performance, the members sat on the edge of the stage, legs dangling like kids again. Taehyung pulled out his phone and took a blurry, badly lit selfie of all 7. No poses. No peace signs. Just real faces. He uploaded it with a single caption. "We're still here, just different." Later backstage, Jungkook found Jimin sitting alone, back against the wall, eyes closed. "You okay?" Jungkook asked softly. Jimin opened one eye. "No." Jungkook sat beside him. "Me neither." "A beat. Want to disappear again?" Jimin asked. Jungkook smiled. "No, I want to stay, but only if you do too." Jimin nodded. "I'll stay." They sat there for a long time, the sound of crew packing up in the distance, the quiet buzz of lights powering down overhead. And for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no echo.